Hi, I'm your host Vasco Duarte. Welcome to the Scrum Master Toolbox podcast, where we share tips and tricks from Scrum Masters around the world. Every day, we bring you inspiring answers to important questions that all Scrum Masters face day after day. Hello everybody, welcome to our Success Thursday this week with Gregory Miller. Hey Gregory, welcome back.
Hey Vasco, how are you? I like to call it, someone called Thursday Little Friday. So that's Little Friday.
Let's take it. Let's take it. Welcome to Little Friday's episode, everybody. All right, so we're going to talk about success, which is, of course, the question of the week. But before we dive into that, do share with us, Greg, what's your favorite retrospective format and why?
Okay. My favorite, I'm sure it's going to be very boring, but it's been very effective for me. So a lot of Agilists out there, like to do fun and games, and I'm for that too. But I like to take the approach of the teams that I like to kind of judge the teams, right? I think you should know your team, who you're working with. One of my failures is not understanding the teams at some points and thinking I can do a certain retrospective, and I get the feedback that they don't like it. Some people want to do, if they have things they want to talk about. So right now I've settled on my favorite is, when I first get a team, I usually use, we use Microsoft Teams now, or some type of whiteboard tool, Mural. That's the tool that I use. In person works well, or remote. It works either way, this way. So I start off as a basic, 3 columns: start, stop, continue. 4 columns: start, stop, continue, and an action items. And I actually throw on a kudos too. So actually 5 columns. I'll have a kudos, start, stop, continue, and a action items. And the reason I do this is one piece of feedback I got real quick at not for me, but another company I took over for a Scrum Master. Again, I said I have a history of taking over for failed Scrum Masters, it seems. Well, this team didn't like the retro. And I was like, what? Who doesn't like? I love retro. Most team members like retro. This team member is like, I don't like it. Come to find out, they were having the great conversations, and that was it. They wouldn't walk away with action items. So my recommendation to anybody doing a retro is have the great conversations, but you got to come out of there with an action item. So that's why I choose to do the format. Now, I always leave the kudos and I always leave the action items, but I mix up the start, stop, continue. There's lots of websites out there. I like to use funretrospectives.com. Change up the start, stop, continue to mad, sad, glad, or anything else you want to do, right? Just mix it up. I like to change. They don't want to see the same thing all the time. And I ask for feedback. Do you like this format? They'll say yes, no, make some suggestions. I always take their feedback, but I'll go through. Kudos allows the team to say, to compliment one another. I think that forms strong teams. They say, thank you for helping me with this. Thank you for helping with that. It starts the retro off to a good tone. Then we dive into if you want to go start, stop, continue, we'll go through that. We'll talk about the things. We usually have some good in-depth conversations. And I always say at the end, let's vote on at least one item we want to move into the action items. I say we don't need to necessarily complete it in the next 2 weeks, but let's start it. Let's say we're going to start working on something. It can be, I can own it, you can own it, whatever. We'll put an owner on it. I'll then take I'll put it on our team board and our Scrum team board that we use, our tool, whatever tool you use, just as a placeholder, right? Don't point it. If you point stories for velocity, just put it in there, call it retro item, just so the team can look it over and say, yeah, remember, we're going to work on this. And then the next retro, I come back and I say, okay, how does the team think we're doing on this? Most of the time I found it's like a behavior thing we're trying to change. And I say, hey, do we think we've, exercised that muscle? Are we in shape or we don't need that reminder? No, I think we tried, but I think we still need to work. Okay, we'll keep working on it till we're done. The team says we're done, then we'll close it out. And every retro we keep, just kind of like a backlog, action item list backlog that we'll go through. And I found the feedback I've gotten from being at many companies, at many teams using this, that they really enjoy it. And that's not to say that I don't take time out to do fun things. The one team just told me the other day that they once a sprint or once a month. We do 2 week sprints every 2 weeks. They would like to do, in addition to this, like a fun team activity. So this team wants to also have fun, but I've been successful with that format. It's not, again, it's not earth shattering, but that's what's worked for me.
Absolutely. And that's what we are looking for here on the podcast, what actually works in practice. Mm-hmm. So, Greg, now we turn our attention to the question of the week, the reason why we hold retrospectives in the first place, and that is, of course, to be a successful Scrum Master. So, share with us, Greg, what's your definition for success as a Scrum Master?
Yeah. So, I have a friend, and you know him, but I have a friend who is a professional Scrum trainer, and a while back, he asked me, if you listen to one of the shows earlier in the week, I said that I had a high performing team, in my opinion. He asked me that question, what would you use to determine a high performing team? And I said some things, right, that I thought, and he boiled it down to 3 things. He said productivity, creativity, and flexibility. Just those 3 things. That stuck with me for the last several years. And I was like, really? So I use that. I've never really, I can't say I've read that anywhere. It could be I'm sure maybe someone has it in a book somewhere, but I'd never read that anywhere, heard that from anybody before. So that stuck in my head. So I use that as my litmus test. And I've even applied it to that high performing team since then, and saying, would that apply to them? And I do think it would. So my key to success, I always have like a game plan in my head, not written down when I'm given a new team. Excuse me. And it's typically to get them to, obviously you want to be productive, right? We want to be what's it saying? Effective first and then efficient. So looking for efficiencies. I come in to see, but I would say I use those 3 things to be successful. It's not just pumping out code, right? We don't want to be just feature factories, right? And pumping out features and coming to work. And you'll find there's people that want to do that, right? That you have to know the individuals. But I would say I would not be successful if I am not able to get the team to work together, to collaborate. I've seen a lot of issues on teams with, you take over a team and someone that's been there for years and years and has all the knowledge. There's always one of those people, right? Try to get someone like that to want to share that knowledge, because in the old waterfall days, right, where knowledge was power, you kept your job because you had all this knowledge. You've been there 25 years, but then the problem is that person leaves, quits, goes on vacation, retires. Then it's a dumpster fire sometimes, right? No one knows what to do because they have all that knowledge. So try to get someone like that to open up. I measure my success by things like that, by those people skills, right? I mentioned earlier, my failure was on one of my teams was failing to do that. Failing to do like one-on-ones, get to know people personally outside of work so that you open up those doors and they can come to you, right? Failing to have the team understand just, basic Scrum, right? If they don't understand, why do we do these ceremonies? Just because you say so? No. Because the Scrum Guide says so? No. I've seen Agilist Scrum Masters fail because they went strictly by the book. They were doing everything right, the process. They would make the team do it, but they didn't know why. They wouldn't tell the team why. They would just say, this is what you have to do. Kind of just like vanilla, black and white, no personality, right? You gotta be personal with them. But they have to produce, right? They have to be able to, at the end of 2 weeks, have something potentially shippable, valuable things, right? Prioritization. So I pride myself on saying that I would be successful if a team can come up with creative solutions to problems, right? If they're definitely productive, they're able to produce at the end of 2 weeks, they're able to release on some type of cadence, maybe. And then their flexibility, right? Once they understand Scrum, the basic process, then I start once they can show me that they've done that, then I start to back off. They're like, if they, maybe the Scrum Guide says we have to do, 4 hours of planning for 2 weeks. Am I going to make you sit there for 4 hours because the Scrum Guide says so? No. If you can do it and be effective in an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours, that's great. That's what I mean when I say flexibility. Flex around those things, show them the rules, but then a team that's proven themselves, give them flexibility to, that's what Scrum says. It's just a framework, right? You need to be able to operate. So whatever works for the team at some point, if they're producing, then I'm good with that. That's success for me.
Absolutely. And one of the things that you mentioned already before and now again is that personal relationship we have with the team is so important. Not only because of, of course, it gives us influence, so we can help them because we, can bring our experience and our knowledge there, but also because we can find out what's going on behind the basic process, right? Because one of the things we talk about is that it's not enough that a team does the process. They have to understand the mindset, embody the values, focus on value, collaborate, and so on. Like, we say those things, but we need to know what they mean by being in contact with the people. It's not just, if we are not building that relationship, as you mentioned in that, I think it was Tuesday's story, if we're not building that relationship with the team and the stakeholders around the team, then there's no way we are going to ever understand when they are ready for us to back off, right? And building that relationship becomes maybe even a core skill for Scrum Masters. We don't really talk about it. I was actually talking about with a previous guest. We were out for coffee. That was one of the rare moments where I could actually meet the previous guest face to face. We were out for coffee and we were talking about how every team is different, but not every team is different in the sense of every team is different, but every team is different even every day. Like, there's different things that are going on. The pressures might be different. The end of the year, somebody got a child, somebody else's parent died, somebody else's boss is having a bad week, and that's causing pressure and stress. Some product owner isn't there, so other things are kind of falling through the cracks. Like, there's so many things happening all the time. And if we aren't able to go beyond the process and understand the people, right? Like how they express productivity themselves and as a team, how they express creativity themselves and as a team, then we can't help them be flexible either.
Correct. Oh yeah. Yeah. It's there was a company I was at, the other Scrum Masters there, we used to call ourselves amateur psychologists. Yeah. For the reasons you just said, it's so important. It's probably important in a lot of jobs too, right? This is one of the few jobs I've ever had where it's really been at the forefront for me. And every time I encounter situations, it comes back to that. Everything leads back to relationships with a person, building that, empathy, right?
And helping them build relationships with each other too, right?
Yeah.
Like, let's not forget that.
Yes. With each other. Yes. Yeah. That's the other aspect. We're work with a team of up to 10 people, right? We got to help them work with each other. That's exactly right.
Absolutely. Greg, it's been a pleasure. This episode alone would have topics enough for us to be on this for another hour. So maybe we should book an episode, maybe with your mate.
There you
Mark,
go. Mark.
And
we can have Mark.
Talk about this people aspects that so important, and we touch on them so often, but we never really go deep. Anyway, it's been a pleasure. We'll see you tomorrow for the product owner episode. So thank you for sharing this story.
Yes, thank you. See you.
Part of a successful Scrum Master job is to help the product owner. Tomorrow we explore that critical role in Scrum, the product owner role. Tune in to learn about product owner anti-patterns, what you can do to help the product owner, and a real-life example of what a great product owner is and what made it so. Tomorrow on our Friday Product Owner episode. See you tomorrow. We really hope you liked our show. And if you did, why not rate this podcast on Stitcher or iTunes? Share this podcast and let other Scrum Masters know about this valuable resource for their work. Remember that sharing is caring.